Hi, this is the Merri-Cast, the show that puts you on the fast track to business confidence. Some people would say that starting a business with friends or family is a bit risky, but for Matt Rogan, it was a no-brainer. I've known Matt for many years, and back in September 2011, around about the time, in fact, that I started my business, Matt, along with his wife Claire and friend Gareth, set up Two Circles, a successful data-driven sports agency that helps organisations build direct relationships with sports and fans. After selling the company twice, Matt's now the founder and director of his own business, Rogan Sport, a portfolio career that he's built, and he's also the non-executive director at the English Institute of Sport. Now, we normally edit these interviews down a bit more, but I just found so much of interest in this that I wanted to play it to you in slightly longer form. And you'll see as we go back to Matt's childhood first, the sporting roots of what he came to do and who he is.
So I grew up on the northwest side of London and spent formative moments of my sort of, I guess, early to mid childhood at the side of tennis courts, watching my mum play, football pitches, watching my dad play, and lo and behold, became a footballer and a tennis player. Sort of through my academic and then early working career, sort of tried to blend those worlds as much as possible. So even though I started off in a generic strategy consultancy set up by spin out of two Bain and two McKinsey partners, I tried to make a name for myself as the guy who knew a little bit about the business of sport as it was slowly emerging even and evolving, and really didn't ever have the heart to go back into a more generic line of industry. So moved from strategy consultancy to the NBA, the US Basketball League, from there to MTV, European Music Channel, a brief but fascinating foray into other forms of entertainment. Then ran a professional service business with best of Olympic sport, psychology, and management into business, where we originally met, of course.
Yeah.
And then was working at the time for a guy, as chief exec, called Adrian Morehouse, who won Best Leader of the Year, Sunday Times, best companies to work for. Learned an enormous amount from, and also knew that was very unlikely I was ever going to be able to run and lead that business laying forward, but knew that I had an extra scratch in terms of wanting to run a business. And so set up my own sports agency called Two Circles with my wife, Claire, and a great mate, a guy called Gareth Bush. But for just short of 10 years, we scaled the sports agency, data and digital focused sports agency, to about 350 people working right around the world, 6 offices. Stepped back from that when we sold it the second time, sold it once to WPP, the big advertising services company, and then was handed on to Brewing Capital, an American-based PE firm. Stepped back from that just short of 2 years ago now, and since then, I guess the classic term is a portfolio career with quite a lot of advisory work inside and outside sport that builds on the journey at Two Circles and what we learned along the way there. A bit of writing, wrote a book about the future of sport last year called All to Play For, and have a couple of non-exec roles as well as part of that jigsaw puzzle. And most importantly now, part of stepping back from the private equity juggernaut is a professional taxi driver to two sporty kids.
Right. Okay. It comes to us all as parents, I think.
Yeah, I love it.
Taxi
Don't get me
driver.
wrong.
Yeah, yeah. And but it's for me, I take my kids to sort of football every week, and and I always hate to admit it, but I get just as much a kick out of it as they do. Let me take you back though. You were talking about your Northwest London days and football and tennis and so on. When you were sort of kicking your first ball or hitting your first tennis ball, I mean, when did it occur to you that sport could not only be your passion, but it could be your career as well?
I remember that almost to the minute, funnily enough. So I must have been 9 or 10. As always, parents kind of when they're also working have to do things with their kids, get them out of their hair during the holidays. And I remember going off to a Bobby Charlton soccer skills camp for a couple of days with a couple of friends from my football team at a place called Bisham Abbey, which at the time was the National Sports Centre just outside Marlow, just off the M4. And walked into this place. It was like nothing I'd seen on earth before. It had hockey pitches and football pitches and tennis courts and a sports centre. And I just remember walking in thinking, you know what, somebody's in charge of this. Somebody's running it.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that's their job. It's not a hobby. It's not like only coaches I'd seen to that point were people who volunteered, like my mum, to coach tennis, like this. So there must be people who can do this for a job, and that was the moment that I think probably the penny dropped for me. And funnily enough, my mum was cleaning out. Once you get your own house, your parents start to discover what they've got in the attic belongs to you, and they're trying to get rid of clutter. So I ended up with a bunch of work I'd done for my GCSEs and found a geography study, I think it was geography, that looked at the effectiveness of sports sponsorship,
Right.
having done a questionnaire with some neighbours in my little cul-de-sac. So I guess the reality is I was probably always moving in that direction from Bobby Charlton's soccer camps onwards.
Did anybody say in like, the school report, young Rogan's showing entrepreneurial tendencies here or anything like that? Or are we talking about a post school period where actually that turned into something which was a bit more entrepreneurial?
Yeah, I mean, no is the answer to that question. The only vocational advice I was ever given in my school report was from my art teacher, who famously still makes my mum chuckle, said, "He tries hard, but his talents lie elsewhere," which we took as feedback to stay away from the more artistic side of the world. And I guess it's a question for this podcast, probably. I'm not sure I naturally see myself as an entrepreneur in
Okay.
the sense that I never saw myself as somebody who was always destined to have their own business. I think probably having my own business was a means to an end for me of feeling like there was a great business idea and nobody was doing it. And if nobody else was doing it for me to be able to join, then maybe I should do it myself rather than see it not come to life. And that was because the premise of the business in Two Circles was helping sport realize its potential as an economic force and also as a social force. And so if that wasn't being done, if sport wasn't based on evidence, it was based on guesswork, if it wasn't based on a deep understanding of the customer groups and the audiences it was trying to serve, then it wasn't going to work. So if nobody was going to do it, then I was going to need to do it. If I'm honest with myself, I would probably have been perfectly happy Adrian deciding he'd had enough of running lane 4 and having the chance to do that myself. So probably being an entrepreneur probably happened by accident, but I was always interested in the business that sat beside sport. And it was something we used to say actually when, as our Two Circles business scale, we were looking for people to join the organization. We used to say that and trying to characterize what is it that makes a great employee at Two Circles. We used to say, if you're exhausted on a Monday night after a hard first day at work, you come home, maybe you got a takeaway pizza, you really not much left in the tank, and you sat down in front of the screen with a football on your sofa. And really, there's a population who love their sport but are quite happy to sort of rest up and watch coloured dots move around a bit of green. Just watch a game for a game's sake. And there's a small, slightly geeky percentage of us who can't help but think, well, why is that advert in Chinese? Why does that stand for when the other one's empty? Why are the referees walking around with this thing in their ear? Who just can't help but be intuitively interested in the business of sport. That was always me, and that was always the kind of people we looked to try and join our business. So even though I'm not a natural entrepreneur, I was definitely naturally interested in what was going on in the dynamics of the business of sport and wanted to play a role in helping it realize its potential.
Okay, give us. I'm just really interested in the moment where you were just starting up Two Circles, and if we just look back at those previous bits of professional experience that you've picked up, you talked about Bain,
Yeah.
and you talked about sort of lane 4 and the brief but fascinating period you mentioned at MTV. Was there something from each of those that got you to that start line point where you thought, this is the business that I want to set up? I mean, although you said that sometimes you see an opportunity there and that maybe you weren't a natural entrepreneur from your perspective, but you saw a need to do something in this business. I'm just interested in what those bits of what each of those little things kind of gave you that got you to that start line.
I think actually there was something from each of them. So if I think about what strategy consultancy taught me, it taught me how to structure and articulate to a senior level the response to a problem. So hypothesis development, testing your hypothesis with quite a scientific way to come out with a really well reasoned and articulate argument as to which direction a client should move into. That fundamental consulting skill, which Two Circles took on. That's what I took from strategy consultancy. MTV and the NBA were ultimately both in the trade. We call them rights holders. So they hold IP and assets that they look to commercialize, whether that's tickets or customers or eyeballs or sponsor through sponsorship, whatever it might be. And so that part of the journey gave me the ability to understand the world of being a rights holder, what it was really like, and the challenges and the realities and the politics and the governmental interventions and all the kind of things that you don't really read about in the press is what I learned there. And then lane four, I wasn't doing the leadership development work mostly. I was trying to run the business, trying to understand the importance of price and cash and contracting terms and IP with clients and that kind of thing. And so if I put those three bits of the jigsaw together, I'd been a consultant. I knew what it was like to craft really strong consultant solutions that chief execs were going to buy into. I'd been a rights holder, so I'd be in the shoes of clubs and teams and leagues trying to make money through the IP that they held. And I'd also run a service business. And so probably was no coincidence that I ended up being chief exec of a service business that delivered consulting solutions for rights holders in sport. Yeah. Perfect storm, if you like.
I mean, the way you described earlier, you were talking about that there was this itch that you had, in terms of starting up your own business. I can really relate to the itch because, I went from journalism to PR to the world in between. And at various stages, I was working for smaller and smaller organizations where I was actually closer to the person who was making the decision each time. And I had this growing itch that actually I want to be that person. Now, it's slightly different for you, though, because you started it up, you said with your wife and your friend and so on. Yeah. Did you have a vision a very clear vision of what you wanted Two Circles to be? And was it the way it turned out, or did it just head off in a completely different direction following whatever the market wanted?
No, it was very, very clear. So my mate Gareth was a GB 800 meter runner, got injured just before the Athens Games, so never really managed to run at the Olympics, which he was perfectly capable of doing from a performance perspective. But he sort of almost subconsciously had been through the same kind of focused learning that Lane 4 provided for elite athletes, which is being really clear on goal setting, really clear on what specific work is going to make your own boat or your own legs run faster, and also being really clear what was extraneous and not going to help in that journey. And so the first thing we did as a team of three on day one was built a 3-year strategy, co-created that between us, and that had a goal-setting framework underneath it that said, look, within the next 3 years, this is loosely what we think we're going to be delivering in terms of products. This is this kind of size we think we're going to be as an organisation in terms of people, in terms of revenue. These are the kind of processes we're going to use, and this is the way we're going to frame our objectives in the market and our market plan. And whilst that was, by the end of the session, sort of 4 or 5 flip charts that I wrote up into a 5-slide pack, we were really clear that that was the direction we were headed in. And in hindsight, one of the best things that ever happened to us was on day one we wrote a strategy that was what we believed the market needed, as opposed to letting ourselves be too led down the line of building anything that customers were buying.
Yeah,
and that was so important because we were trying to build a service that the market, honestly, didn't really know it needed yet. So the kind of work we were doing, synthesizing down divergent data sets from ticketing or hospitality or email subscriptions or retail transactions for a club or a team or a league in sport, building those in single customer views and helping clients use that as a source of intelligence on their customers to make smart commercial decisions. Sport wasn't doing that at the point we built the business. Tesco was doing that, Sainsbury's were doing that, Nectar were doing that, but sport wasn't yet. And so if we'd been too led by what the market said it wanted to buy today, we wouldn't have delivered on the potential of the business, because we'd have spent 5 years just sending emails to clients or doing some fairly basic digital marketing, whereas actually it needed a giant leap ahead. So we need to be really clear what they needed of us.
Okay, just a quick one there on that vision and that strategy. I mean, obviously, you'd had that background, that experience in what you're doing, and you're saying that the industry didn't know quite what it wanted or that it had the need for it. Were you early on? Were you a bit too ahead of the market? Is it possible to be a bit too ahead of it in the sense that you kind of almost not wait for the market, but you've got an education job to do on the market to show them that they had that need? And was that an easy thing to do, or did it require a bit of patience?
We have first mover advantage for sure. We were lucky to have the support of a couple of fantastic clients who were very leading edge themselves. So Manchester City, and they were so useful for us as a client because this was before the era of sort of fair play regulations and not being able to spend your way to success. And so Man City were able to effectively pay for tomorrow's technology today. So they were a fantastic petri dish for us, the nicest possible way in terms of understanding what of tomorrow's technology was really going to work from a commercial perspective in a sporting setting. And the second client were Karina Murta and Gordon Hollins at England Wales Cricket Board. So cricket were our other first client. And they were less focused on the technology side, interestingly, but more focused on the sort of softer change management side that we knew we were going to have to be experts at if we were going to shift the way in which sport thought. So between them, we were able to find evangelists and co-conspirators, I guess, in terms of exploring this space and making sense of it. And, the England Wales Cricket Boards, where are we now, sort of best part of 12 years on, and remain clients of Two Circles and have been ever since day one.
And what do you, I mean, I'm interested in if you've got these good clients, but good clients don't come around by accident. They come, through good networking, through, getting in those proposals and having those conversations. Who did what amongst the three of you? Because, I mean, obviously you would have relative competitive strengths in certain areas. I mean, were you the front man or were you the doer? I mean, how did it all work between you? Did you each have natural strengths? Because sometimes people form businesses together, and one of the big problems is very often they have the same strength as each other. So what were you in that, and what were the others?
The way we divided the roles from day one was I ran the business, Claire ran the numbers, Gareth ran the clients. And that was because I've been running a service business for Adrian for 7 years. So, I thought I had a pretty good grasp of what that was going to need, what that was going to take, and was to create sort of sustained success. Claire's background was in venture capital and private equity, so investing in and supporting fast growth businesses in all sorts of sectors, both in terms of the investment lead, but then as a portfolio director sitting on the boards of those businesses. So Claire was sort of quasi finance director, but also sort of guardian angel really in terms of having seen businesses with the growth trajectory we aspired to, seeing what they did right and seeing what they did wrong. She was our sort of secret weapon in terms of from a guardian angel perspective, really. And Gareth's previous career, including a stint at Manchester City, which was where that client came from ultimately, was focused in the sort of the deep data management and cleansing side of a professional football club. So Gareth had the battle scars from that journey. And so that's in the natural division of labour. So
yeah. Okay. So lovely complementary strengths, but there's three of you, and I'm sure it wasn't three of you for very long. So how quickly did you start getting people on board? I mean, were you just recruiting people who you kind of knew in the industry, or were you having to look sort of further afield?
No, I mean that's
skills. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I think in the first 70 people we hired, the first interview of whom I'd done every single one. I think I'm right in saying 8 came from sport. Because if we were trying to do something that sport hadn't done before, why would you hire people from sport?
Yeah.
So we were looking for people who had done deep data analytics for Tesco. Our development director, also still with the business this day, Jackie Hunter, and most of her experience had come from Punch Taverns and so on and so forth. So we were looking for people who had solved similar problems in different industries and backed ourselves that if they had the right emotional intelligence and desire to learn, we could teach them the sports industry. Which was the easy bit of the jigsaw puzzle, really. And so we were hiring within 6 weeks, and we were looking for a blend of emotional intelligence, analytic rigor, that intuitive understanding of the business of sport. While Jackie was development director at Punch Tavern, she'd also been a Middlesbrough season ticket holder and asked herself those questions around why the West Stand was empty when it should have been full and things like that. And so we took the view that we weren't interested in building a business full of freelancers. We wanted to build a business that had equity value. In order to do that, we wanted to keep the knowledge of what we were doing, why we were doing it, the IP, the code, and all those kind of things in the business. And so we went with a full-time as model. And so hiring as a result of that was absolutely fundamental to the success of the business. And we looked in some pretty unusual places to find the right people.
I'm really interested in this whole dynamics of growth, because you're talking only about sorry, did you say 10 or 11 years, I think you said, of that period of growth?
So it'll be 11 years this year.
11 years this year, right. What did you struggle with? I mean, the road to success is not always a smooth path. Well, it's very rarely a smooth path. I mean, were there periods in that sort of where you got so far, but then you were bumping your head up against a ceiling, a feeling you weren't going to get any further? I mean, were there things that you, either personally or as a team, sort of found particularly tricky to get through?
I think the biggest temptation was probably various points we had. We had opportunities to veer off track from that plan we written on day one. So, for example, we were really clear that we wanted to work for clubs and teams and leagues, and we had a couple of approaches from brands to do the same kind of stuff, but maybe for a beer company that sponsored a sport, for
Yeah.
example, or a shoe company that made shoes that the athletes wore to compete. And we took the view every time, but it took a lot of debate that and maybe distract us a little bit that we were going to stick to the plan in terms of working for the rights holders. And everyone told us we were mad.
Mm.
Why are you doing that? There are more brands. B, the brands have more money. C, the brands sign long-term contracts, sponsorship contracts, and once you're in, you won't get kicked out. But we thought that we did show the direction of travel was changing, and so we stuck to our guns. But that was quite distracting, and that could easily have thrown us off path.
Did that get harder, Matt, though, as you got bigger? Because there might be more people in the business, other than the three of you who started it, who were telling you that you were a bit mad not to be doing it and so on. Did that become an increasing challenge when the non-sports businesses came calling?
I think probably got less challenging just because we could evidence the fact that the current strategy was paying off. But that's not to say we ever sort of kicked that can down the road without having that dialogue. We wanted to create a culture where people could raise those challenges. It's interesting actually if you look at post my time, Two Circles acquired a capability in a business called TRM that looks to find sponsors and brands to partner with the rights holders that Two Circles are working for. So they never actually the path ended up being more similar than we might have intended it for it to be at the beginning. Probably the other thing though, I would think in terms of the challenge is, and the thing that felt tricky was ultimately we decided that we wanted to go down the path of building a business without any debt in business.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't borrow to build the business, and service businesses in general actually drink cash because you have to pay to hire the people. They then take 3 to 6 months to get up to speed, to then do the work for clients who, if you do a good job, pay you within 2 months. Right. So the drain of cash to grow a business like Two Circles was significant. That's before you think about sort of the technology investment things you need to make in order to build the solutions to analyze the data for clients. And so managing our cash was always something that took a lot more blood, sweat, and tears actually than managing the profit of the business.
Mm.
No business has ever gone out of business because it's not profitable to go out of business because they run out of cash. And so for us, that was a constant source of focus and attention, far more probably than a lot of sports agencies.
Was that just something that you decided about, the sort of not having debt and so on? I mean, that's the sort of, we just want this growth to be organic. That was a sort of decision, or was it an attitude to debt that you all kind of, as the three sort of had right at the start?
Yeah, I think Claire's experience in private equity have been that, there needs to be a pretty good reason to give any equity in your business away, especially when that equity is not very expensive because there's not a lot on your balance sheet. And we put that together with the fact that, none of us were sitting on family nest eggs or significant amount of personal wealth. So, it was a case of putting mortgages on the line in terms of stopping paying them in order to be able to get a holiday, to put some cash in the business and not pay ourselves. So that was quite a fine line. And yet at the same time, we had two fantastic clients in England Wales Cricket Board and Manchester City who actually were quite excited about the fact that they were early clients of this startup business. And that was one of the things probably we learned the hard way was it took us a long time to realise that the more we talked to clients about the fact we're working from our kitchen table and this was a new venture and the Christmas cards had been posted and stamped up by our 10-year-old kids, the more they loved it.
Yeah.
So, we probably took too long pretending to be bigger than we were and actually just being ourselves and being authentic in that and, recognizing the fact we're all working at kitchen tables and, I'm talking to you while I'm loading the dishwasher because Claire's got to get the numbers to the bank tomorrow. Clients actually quite enjoyed that as opposed to finding that it's all unprofessional. That's probably a reflection of demographic change happening in Britain.
Things have changed
as well.
Things have changed a lot. You're right. I mean, I sort of, I do most of these interviews. I'm not today, but I do most of these interviews from my garden shed. And I always used to talk to people from my garden shed, and they seemed to absolutely love it. And it didn't matter about whether I was, just me or 10 people or whatever. They liked that whole kind of insight. And I suppose we got a bit of that in the pandemic, where people were more likely to be seen in a different environment as well.
Exactly. I mean, I think if you think about the world that we were competing against, if anyone's seen the movie Jerry Maguire, the big slick American sports agency offices hadn't changed a lot on the back of the London Olympics, where old people made a lot of money, swanking around in big funky offices, and to be the complete antithesis of this when you're a startup trying to offer something totally different was not a bad look at all. Just
Yeah.
to come back actually on one of the things you were saying, about potential blockers. If there's one thing we did well in the setup of our business, and I give great credit to Claire actually in this regard with her private equity background, is none of the shifts in gear from the business that we found. There was definitely one from sort of 10 to 12 people. We had to kind of jump up a little bit again, and we maybe need one more room or one more office, or we needed a proper payroll system, or whatever. And then we got to 35, and we weren't quite sure we could remember everyone's partner's name, and we needed a proper performance management system and performance review system. Then we
Yeah.
got to 65, and we started to think about international offices. Then we got to 120, and needed to change banks and things like that. But none of those jolts took us by surprise, and that's because, thanks to Claire, maybe thanks to some of the experiences I'd had at Lane 4 as well, we always knew what the next step was going to look like. And one of the very first things we wrote down on our business plan on day one, sat around my kitchen table, was we want the foundations in the business that are suitable for a business 18 months on from our own. So if we're a £2 million turnover business and we wanted to double next year, we wanted to have the cash management systems, finance systems, the products, quality of people that you would expect from a £5 million business. And that was why cash was permanently a bit of a juggle, but also that stood us in fantastic stead, because none of those big transitions, which are the points where a lot of service businesses in particular can stand still, really took us by surprise. And my job as chief exec, we really permanently characterised as foundations. So, for example, if we were flat out with work to the point that we didn't have a moment to look out into the market, then I took myself out of client work and made sure I was in the market. And the other thing that was the total key, I think, for us during that period was we only took on new business if we could fit it in. So our revenue trajectory, I mentioned ECB were clients from day one, continue to be to this day. We used to call it a layer cake, because if you looked at our revenue client by client over the last 12 years, you would see just renewal upon renewal upon renewal upon renewal.
Can I pick you up on something you just said, that whenever you were basically spending too much time with clients and not enough time looking at the market, you sort of pulled yourself away. I think a lot of people, particularly at the early stages of business, would find that very hard. And maybe this is why they don't end up growing in the way they should. It's one thing to be able to say, I wanted to do that, and you did it. How were you able to sort of, particularly in the earlier days, sort of extricate yourself? Because I'm sure there would be people saying, no, we want Matt on our account. We want to hear what Matt thinks about this. And you might not want to tell them what you think, and you may think you've got perfectly good people to do that for you. But sometimes it's a bit tricky, isn't it? Because they identify you with the business.
Yeah, I guess the key thing was two things. Firstly, Gareth still is the best deliverer of client work and client solutions, the most client-focused person I've ever been lucky enough to work with. Number one. Number two, we never charged my time, which gave us the upper hand. So any time I spent in the FA, in the LTA, working in the NFL, whatever it might be, was additional and beyond what we contracted to a client, which meant that we always had the prerogative to be able to go, client team have got this, they're the ones we're billing for, I'm on top of all the deliverables. However, I'm not in the room today, and I've never contracted to be in the room with you.
Okay.
If you need me, I'm there at a heartbeat, but by default, but as generically, I'm not there. And frankly, Gareth ran the vast majority of the work anyway, because it was running so quickly, which I think it was about 2.5 years in that we pulled myself out of client work entirely, just because the running the business was a 6-day-a-week job as well.
Can I take you?
That
Yeah, please go on. Yeah.
piece was so fundamental to the growth, though, because to win an additional piece of work from an existing client was both cheaper, because it wasn't a shot in the dark pitch more often than not. Often it was a non-competitive pitch. You could often use the same senior people on the client and so on. So we never got to the end of the year in a situation where we didn't know where next month's payroll was coming from. We always knew it was coming from existing clients. And then, the reality is that the new business we looked on as cream. So our business model and our overheads were built on our existing clients. New business we could look on as cream, and that was really so important to the way we thought about the business. And frankly, probably taught me 30 years too late in life the benefit of playing hard to get because we so many of the clients we turned down said, look, we're really busy at the moment. Our priorities to our existing clients, so I'm afraid just not going to be able to pitch for this because we do want to do it properly.
Yeah.
Can't guarantee to you we would do it properly. Every single one of those came back and gave us a chance to pitch another time.
Yeah, that's so important, isn't it? I mean, what you've described as, hard to get, because I think a lot of people, they don't play enough like that, and what happens is they then get sucked into maybe lower value work than they're actually worth, and it sort of takes up too much of their time, and they don't really value the fact that they could have been spending that time and actually surveying the market or getting the new business in, which is also a form of revenue generation. It just happens to be revenue generation for tomorrow.
For sure. I mean, it's if you can't do a piece of work to the best of your ability, or can't serve a meal to the best of your ability as a business, whatever it might be, then I would challenge you while you're doing it, just because the cost of acquiring a new client is so significant compared to the cost of an operational stress of renewing an existing client. Sports industry has been completely guilty of being so focused on new client acquisition. That's what makes the trade press. You don't really will a renewal of a client go in the trade press, but a new deal is sexy and fun and intellectually quite interesting. Gets all the press, but it's the toughest way to grow.
Right. I want to take you sort of, well, not fast forward for you, but fast forward in the story where we are at the moment to the point where you were deciding to sell. And that's also a very tough challenge for people. I mean, did you find it tough, or did you find it ridiculously easy to make that decision?
Well, I guess the question is whether you talk about the first time and the second time. So we first sold to WPP, the advertising services company, and then grew in a US private equity fund, bought the business out of WPP. So there were kind of two sale processes that we sat across. The pace, I think it was about 3.5 years that the first deal went through under, and that really did take us by surprise. We always knew we were going to need investment to achieve the potential of the business, because whilst we were comfortable running out of cash flow and mortgages held and things like that, in the UK market, I knew pretty well. We knew that to scale internationally was going to be a whole different ballgame. We would need strategic partners. We would need offices and visas and all sorts of expensive things around the world. And it just so happened that we really liked the WPP team. This was at the point where Martin Sorrell, who was leading WPP, was, I think, the second non-ICC member non-International Olympic Committee member to address the group of members after Ban Ki-moon. We were also on the board of Formula One, really well networked in the global business of sport, which was exactly what we needed. And so the WPP deal came earlier than we'd expected. And the truth is, it just felt like the right route for us to deliver on the potential business. As I sort of hinted at earlier, none of us, three of us, particularly extrinsically motivated. So delivering all the business was capable of was our objective, and WP felt the right partner for that. It was another of those situations where down the road, everyone was keen to tell us that we'd sold too early and we were mad, and we might have got more from this partner or that partner. But the truth of it was, WP were a great brand to be part of, really helped us scale internationally, did what they said they were going to do, and we felt like we were in a really good home. So, felt it was absolutely the right decision to make. And it never felt like our business at that point on. Never sure I felt like an entrepreneur. We're hiring people within 7 weeks, 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
We hired somebody at least once a month, I think, for the first 8 years. So if that is the case, like, it never feels like your business or your baby. It always feels like our business and our collective decision to make as to where we move forward. So it didn't feel a wrench at all. It felt like exactly the right thing to do. And frankly, the same was true the second time with Bruin.
Yeah, and so you didn't go through that. I mean, because I think the way you described your 3-year strategy at the start, I mean, I think there's a similar period of adjustment for a lot of people who do sell their businesses, because a lot of them stay on after the sale and actually take some getting used to. But it sounds like you didn't really have those pangs because of the way you started the business, that it was our, not mine, or so it was less of a wrench, is what you're saying. So have I summarized that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's right. And the second transaction into private equity was just because we delivered on all the potential of that first growth plan. And sport had changed. So first party data, digital marketing, delivery of Sky Go, for example, on your phone, or Peacock, whatever you've got in the States on your phone to watch broadcasts and stuff, is like sport had changed beyond all measure. And actually, the business found itself strategically front and center of the way sport was moving. So to have a partner that could speculate to accumulate in a way that a quoted business in WPP couldn't was what the business needed next. And so WPP and Bruin together came to a position that enabled Two Circles since to be doing all sorts of things, investing money in building new products with clients, with the International Basketball League, whatever it took, was absolutely what they need to be doing then. So because the business arguably moved quicker than the market, it was able to sort of dictate its ownership structure in a way that was compelling twice rather than once. And we were lucky. We made our own luck, but we were lucky that the market moved in our direction too.
Yeah. So I'm interested now in the kind of post Two Circles world that you're now inhabiting, and you're doing sort of a number of different things. I mean, I know you'll sort of tell me about this. I particularly want to talk about your book that you had out recently, one that was shortlisted. So could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I would love to hear more about that. I was lucky enough to see an early copy of a previous book that you wrote, which you very kindly sort of showed me around the Olympics. You wrote with your dad, but maybe just tell us about the two books quickly, and just so that you're a man who's very good at writing as well as sort of building a business. So I'm interested to hear what kind of stirs your juices on those things.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing to understand is when Claire and I stepped back from Two Circles, I guess the business was completed. It would have been about 4 weeks into lockdown.
Right.
So we're in this strange situation where, having been flying around like proverbial flies for 9 months trying to get the deal done, all of a sudden we sort of sat at home going, "Oh, love, we're married as well." And I had a stark choice between either finding a way to make myself very, very busy again, or homeschooling my very strong-willed, then 10-year-old daughter. And so, sort of slightly skittishly say the book was a good way to make myself busy again pretty quickly. But in all seriousness, I guess I'd spent 10 years of my life thinking principally about the commercial side of sports as part of my day job, and spent the rest of my time thinking out for jogs or whatever it might be, thinking more broadly about sports. So, for example, sports power as a way to keep me healthy through some of the most stressful times I've ever been through. Sports potential to keep my kids sane during lockdown, in the way that they seem to learn a lot better if I'd taken them out for a jog around first thing in the morning. Sports potential to completely build a brand new area of London on the back of the Olympic Park. That actually seemed a lot more fun to live in than most of the older, more Victorian areas of London. And so seeing all these things that sort of suggested to me outside of my day job that sport was getting to a really interesting position in terms of how it could help our society move forward in terms of health, education, planning, seeing like the influence of somebody like a Marcus Rashford as an athlete activist through the COVID period as well. And wanting, maybe as part of a cathartic process from Two Circles as well, just to sort of take a step back and say, okay, where are we going with this whole sport thing in this fairly challenged British society? Of the context we talked about in the book as the toxic alphabet of austerity, Brexit, COVID, debt, and the environment. So against that fairly stark backdrop my kids are growing up in, like, what is this sport thing and how can it help us? Mm-hmm. And so I spent the best part of 6 months trying to make some sense of that and turning that into I've described in a couple of places, a manifesto. I don't really like the word, but just a bit of a glass half full view of where sport might go going forward. Mm-hmm. And was lucky to find in Penguin a publisher that believed in it as much as I did. And so I've had a lot of fun, in particular after lockdowns loosened up and things, going out and talking to people about some of the ideas and possibilities that come out of the book, and been some amazing places, which on the most glamorous level to Formula One and the International Olympic Committee and things, talking about the future of sport and helping a couple of clothing businesses thinking about what that might mean for their business. And the flip side, in primary schools and prisons and with charities and things, thinking about the power of sports and the opportunity in terms of driving social good. So it's been an amazing journey for the last 18 months. Still am out and about talking about it, and my wife would say I talk at the opening of an envelope, but genuinely I'm passionate about those subjects, and so I'm quite a cheap date in that regard. And it's been a real pleasure actually to be able to be that giving and unstructured and unfocused and without any clear strategic goals with it, because I spent 10 years in that world of firm goal setting, and it's been a real pleasure. So I do that kind of like a day and a half a week, do a bit of writing, similar subjects to the Evening Standard. And then the rest of my kind of world is business advisory and non-exec work, effectively inside and outside sport. I don't ever want to just work inside sport because I think it's easy to stop learning when you just stay in one industry vertical.
Just out of interest, did you find the non-exec stuff easy? Because a lot of people find that harder than they expect, because they can go in, they could advise. I've been in this position where you go in and you advise, but you don't necessarily know what then happens, or you don't really have a role in what then happens. And some people find that, or easy to do and walk away and then come back again in a month's time. But did you find that, or did you want to be part of the solution as well?
Well, I love it. I would say I'm probably a jack of many trades and a master of none. And so actually for me to spend, I don't know, a couple of days a month in a business with board meeting and a prep meet, whatever, giving 80% of my brain and knowledge and experience and 20% of my time is rewarding for me, and probably the most useful split for somebody I'm helping as well. However, I think it doesn't work, and it's not really rewarding for either party if it's just a case of here's the board meeting, here's 3 or 4 open questions and a couple of suggestions, see you in a month. I believe an effective high-led role, you kind of need to be have a couple of check-ins during a month. It might just be being available for a call, and the relationship becomes more of a kind of a mentoring type situation during that period as well. So you're there on a more, for me, that's rewarding because I feel more part of the team, and hopefully it's more helpful than just a load of open questions at a board meeting for the exec as well. But that also reflects probably the type of organisations I help. So it's either sort of faster growth businesses inside, outside sport, or those that are in the kind of entertainment space. And a couple I do as well in the public sector, where for the Olympic and Paralympic movement, where frankly they just don't have enough people with experience in those organisations because of budgets. And so being a bit more giving you your time, I think actually makes it more rewarding for everyone.
Okay. We want to give our listeners the confidence they need to succeed. Let me take you back again to Matt Rogan, first day of Two Circles. I mean, is there a single message that you would give to the listeners about what you did, how you did it, and also what that might translate into for them? Is there a single piece of advice you'd give to anybody who was just starting up there in business?
I think I speak to a lot of people who, in fact, I spoke to one this morning, who can get a little bit confused by, so in their head, knowing what the right route for the business is to deliver the best thing for the business, but also knowing what they're going to enjoy most and what makes them most passionate. And I think a lot of people find that a bit of a wrench. So almost come up with an imperfect idea where they haven't got a cracking business model and a really intrinsically and extrinsically motivational idea they can get themselves behind. So I would say spending more time coming up with something that's both really compelling from a business perspective and going to get you out of bed in the morning is fundamental. Number one. Number two, I'd say from a confidence perspective, like there is no right way to start business. Nobody has all the answers. And actually, I think you find, I expect like this podcast, people who've been through that journey are really prepared to give time. Just bounce stuff around because we know what it's like. It can feel very lonely, and that'd probably be the third piece of advice, which is try and surround yourself with other people who won't mind you downloading to, other people who, at least emotionally, you feel are on that journey with you a little bit too. Like we were so lucky, Gareth, Claire, and I, because like through the course of the three of us, you bet your life in the first 3-4 years in the business, 1 in 3 of us every single day was going to have a bad day. 1 in 3 of us was going to have an okay day. 1 in 3 of us was going to have a great day. And it was our job to share, and we shared a lot. Hardly a day went by where I didn't talk to Gareth and Claire, just to keep each other on the straight and narrow. And if you're a sole entrepreneur, that I think is the hardest thing, just the loneliness of the solo entrepreneur. So finding people that you can share the ups and the downs with, I think is fundamental. And the fourth thing would just be having an outlet. Scientifically, everyone's better if they're going through a set of problems or have something tough to puzzle out, changing the frame of reference, going for a jog, playing some music, listening to some music, watching some telly, whatever it is that helps you switch off and then on again, you have to be able to do it. Because being in an isolated, lonely pursuit, which is going to feel like it's going wrong more than it's going right, and not having somewhere to go and some people to talk to, I think that's where it's no fun.
That's a fantastic answer. I I asked you for one single message and I got four for the price of one.
Sorry,
No,
long-winded.
no, it wasn't. It was because everyone was spot on and things that I personally could identify with as well. Now, Matt, just finally, if people want to get hold of you, how can they do so? What's the best way to get hold of Matt Rogan these days?
Well, it depends if you want the actually very good DJ in Torbay or me. There's Matt Rogan as a DJ in Torbay as well.
Really?
Yeah, my website is mattrogansport.com. That's got a bit more about sort of some of the writing stuff on it. My email address is matt@mattrogansport.com, and I'm on Twitter and Instagram and all that malarkey. I'm a little bit too old for TikTok, but I try. Not much good though. Typically, just drop me an email. Happy to chat. It's a tough. Yeah, entrepreneurship is tough emotionally. It can be tough financially, but the sort of 2 years of meltdown we're going into, all the statistics would say markets disrupt and are most open to entrepreneurship when they're going through tough economic times. So if you're not sure whether to jump off, now is the time.
Well, my goodness, there's so much to enjoy in that interview. For me personally, it was when Matt started to explain what it was like starting a business as part of a team and how on that very first day they set out the strategy, they worked it all out, they wrote it all down, and then they went out and executed. It sounds very easy. I'm sure it wasn't quite that easy, and there were lots of challenges along the way. But I just think that's such a great place to start. The importance of that early plan is crucial. Then there's also the importance of having an outlet when things don't go quite so well, when there are bumps along the road, to actually just switch off and go and do something else. Or if you've got kids, to watch them go and do something else and get your relaxation in whatever way works for you. I thought was a really interesting point. And then finally, the whole issue about playing hard to get with clients, I think, is absolutely crucial. Sometimes when you're successful, you get approached by people and ask you to do something slightly different, and you have to consider whether that fits within the niche that you set out to serve, whether it's worth taking a chance and experiment or not. And in Matt's case, he was relating a story about how there was quite a lot of temptation to go down a particular route, but then it would take them away from the plan that they set out, and so they ended up saying no, and it sort of paid benefits and dividends for them in making that decision. So thank you, Matt. That was an absolutely brilliant interview, and I loved every second of talking to you. And thank you to the listeners for tuning in. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate and review through your usual podcast provider. And if you want to find out more about the Merri-Cast or our business Merrible Media, you can find us on LinkedIn. It's Trevor Meriden on LinkedIn or Charlotte Walter on LinkedIn. Don't forget to join us for our next episode. But until then, thanks for listening.